Did you know that Europe tried to cancel the war like a streaming subscription? In 1814, after years of Napoleonic bullshit, European leaders decided it was time to take a break from the chows. They held meetings, drew new maps, shook hands with that "now we go" attitude. But was it really peace? Or just a made-up reboot? Today, we're going to find out what really happened behind the so-called Peace of 1814, that historic moment that many people sell as a landmark of stability, but which also included censorship, paranoia, colonialism, and decisions made on the spur of the moment. Yes, the war stopped, but the cost. It was much higher than you might think. And at the end of the video, we're going to ask a question that might make you a little uncomfortable. Now let's get started. Imagine that oil painting of the Congress of Vienna. Men with perfectly trimmed sideburns, frilly clothes, and that posture of 19th century European wisdom. There they are, shaking hands, exchanging diplomatic smiles, sealing agreements. It's like the happy ending of a historical series. Like the last episode of a season of Game of Thrones, when everyone pretends that things have been resolved. But you know that the chows is just gathering steam for the next bloodbath. That's the official image of 1814. Peace, order, stability. The Peace of Vienna has become a symbol of a more mature, more civilized Europe, ready to leave the Napoleonic shenanigans in the past and move forward with class and progress. But hold on. Because, just like in Assassin's Creed, when you think you're playing with the good guys, but you start to realize that there's something wrong there, the same goes for this historical moment. The Peace of 1814 wasn't exactly that "ooh, good one" moment. It was more like that uncomfortable silence in a family group after someone drops a passive-aggressive hint. Yes, the war is over. Napoleon has been kicked to an island. The European powers finally sat down to talk like adults. But what was decided there wasn't just about peace. It was about control and fear. Prevention at all costs. Freedom. Only for aristocrats. Equality. Only if you ignored the colonies. Fraternity. Perhaps among kings who played chess with entire countries. Today, we're going to lift the rug and see what's been hidden. We're going to understand how this peace was built, and who it was really for. And spoiler, it wasn't for everyone. Have you ever tried to keep the peace at home by avoiding any arguments, even though you know inside that everyone hates each other? Like letting that lame joke go in the family group just to avoid blowing up Christmas? Welcome to the Metternich system. After 1814, Austrian Prince Clemens von Metternich became Europe's group moderator. Only instead of silencing messages or kicking out the uncle who shares fake news, he used censorship, espionage, and bayonets. Freedom of the press? Under wraps. Books, newspapers, pamphlets, everything went through a filter that would make some of today's algorithms jealous. Want to criticize the government? Get your passport ready for exile. And it didn't stop there. Universities came under surveillance. Students? Suspects by definition. It was like every classroom was an episode of Black Mirror, with an inspector writing down everything you said. Even Control+C/Control+V was shouted, but the fear of being reported was already there. Any sign of liberal rebellion, any nationalist flame, was smothered quickly. Like closing an antivirus pop-up. Delete, it's gone. Revolts were crushed with brutal efficiency. And this peace was maintained on the basis of repression. This is where the comparison to Cyberpunk 2077 comes in. You have a government that says, everything is fine, everything is under control, while watching your every move and eliminating any dissenting voices. Only instead of neon and cybernetic implants, it was top hats and handwritten letters. Analog terror. This was the peace Metternich sold. A forced silence, a plasticized calm. No chaos. But no freedom either. Or, as the uncle at the barbecue would say, peace, but with censorship, okay? As European leaders toasted with crystal goblets and celebrated their diplomatic genius, one question remained unanswered. Peace for whom exactly? After all, it's easy to keep the peace in the upscale neighborhood when you send chows to the outskirts. And that's exactly what happened. Peace between the great powers was bought with violence exported to the less important corners of the map. In other words, the colonies. After all, if you can't go to war with your neighbor, what about invading an entire continent that can't defend itself? Britain, for example, was busy consolidating its rule in India. It wasn't really a colony, it was more of a Civilization 6-style corporate takeover. Plant a flag, control the resources, change the local culture, and claim to be civilizing. Meanwhile, France, licking its post-Napoleon wounds, tried to spread its influence in North Africa. The rhetoric was nice. Bring progress, bring culture. But in practice, it was plunder with a fancy accent. It's as if Europe had put the continent in easy mode, like a game tutorial, and left the rest of the world in nightmare mode. Colonization, violence, wealth extraction, cultural destruction. All while posing as the masters of reason at the Congress of Vienna. Remember Black Panther? Wakanda was a shining exception on a continent that in real life was being systematically emptied by European empires. If the movie had been set in 1814, it would probably have ended with a British diplomat saying, "We have brought peace," while planting a flag over a burning village. The irony is that this European peace was maintained by constant imperial wars. But these wars didn't make the headlines because they weren't part of the history books that praised civilization. They were in the background as noise and collateral. But they were real and deadly. And this shift in perspective, pretending that the world is calm while the violence is merely outsourced, has a very deep root. The collective trauma of a continent that was ground to a pulp by the Napoleonic Wars for a quarter of a century. And that's where the next chapter begins. Hey Discovers, real quick before we dive back in, I've got a small favor to ask. If you love historical curiosities, epic battles, crazy mysteries, and mind-blowing stories that most people don't know about, then hit that subscribe button right now. That way, you won't miss any of our new videos and can keep uncovering insane facts every week. And of course, smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow and brings you even more awesome content. Alright, let's jump back into history. After 25 years of Napoleonic wars, revolutions, empires rising and falling faster than celebrities on Twitter, Europe was just exhausted. Seriously, it was like a condominium meeting that turned into a general fight, and in the end everyone just wanted to go back to the sofa and pretend nothing had happened. But the trauma remained. Devastating military campaigns, millions of dead, maps redrawn with the frequency of Google Maps updates, and an ideological roller coaster that left the European elite trembling with fear. Fear of losing power. Fear of another revolution. Fear of everything exploding again. So what do you do when you're traumatized? You try to control it. Everything. Every detail. It's like the world after September 11th. The fear is so deep that everything becomes a threat. You start to see danger even in the shadows. Or, in the case of 1814, even in a liberal idea scribbled by a student in Vienna. This paralyzing mentality produced a kind of peace that seemed rational, but was driven by paranoia. Remember the line in The Dark Knight, either you die a hero, or you live long enough to become a villain. Many of the leaders who claimed to be defenders of order ended up creating systems as oppressive as the ones they fought. All in the name of stability. Peace became a response to fear. A reflection of a traumatized continent trying not to repeat the mistakes of the past, but in the process building an even more tense, even more authoritarian present. And here's an important question. Has this peace based on fear really prevented new conflicts? Or did it merely postpone the inevitable? The answer lies in the next section, where we'll see how this balancing act between the powers was more fragile than it seemed, and how sometimes all it took was one false move for everything to fall apart. The peace after 1814 was not built on heartfelt hugs and group therapy sessions. It was built on political calculation. Cold, methodical, almost mathematical. Enter the realist theory of international relations, that look that says, the world is a mess, nobody trusts anybody, and the best way to avoid war is to make everybody afraid of everybody else. It's like Game of Thrones, the diplomatic version. No one can have too much power, or the game gets out of balance. As long as the throne is empty, or no one is strong enough to take it, there's a kind of uneasy peace. But one misstep and the dragon breathes fire. That's what the Congress of Vienna tried to do. Create a system of checks and balances between the great empires. A delicate arrangement where everyone kept an eye on everyone else. Not because they trusted each other, but because they didn't. It was the balanced lobby of the Congress of Vienna. It was the balanced lobby of geopolitical overwatch. Any player who got too strong was nerfed through diplomacy. If one empire got too big, the others joined in to bring it back down to earth. This game worked. For a while. It prevented total war for almost 100 years, which is practically a miracle by European standards. But it was a system as unstable as a pile of dishes on the edge of a sink. For while this balance avoided direct confrontation, it also hindered change. It stifled progress. And it kept entire empires running under old, inefficient, authoritarian structures, all in the name of order. But if this balance froze the battlefield, it also freed energy for other fronts. Science, industry, health, education. When the guns stopped talking, they started building. And that's what we'll see next. How this uneasy peace made room for the quiet revolutions that shaped the modern world. The period after 1814 was not all repression and paranoia. The lull in major wars also made room for something Europe had long needed, a breather. Less money going to cannons meant more investment in practically everything you associate with modern civilization. Railroads, hospitals, schools, universities, museums, science, urban planning, labor laws, albeit precarious ones. The 19th century was the playground of structural change. It's like when you finally pay off your credit card. You stop putting out fires and start renovating your house, replacing your sofa, signing up for an online course. Peace allowed this rebalancing of priorities. States started building heavy infrastructure. Coal became king. Factories grew, and with them came unions, mass media, debates about citizenship and representation. It was the organized chaos of the Industrial Revolution. Ugly, noisy, unfair on many levels, but revolutionary. Think of the atmosphere of Peaky Blinders, a world between war and modernity, where progress runs alongside decadence, with smoke in the streets and ambition in the ideas. That was the spirit of the 19th century. Peace did not mean paradise. Far from it. But it did give time. And time is one of the rarest currencies in history. Time to plan, to innovate, to question. To get out of survival mode and enter, albeit slowly, building mode. And then we realize the ultimate irony. Although built on fear, repression, and exclusion, this peace planted seeds that would flourish, and also seeds that would explode a century later. For while the railroads were being built and the cities were growing, the world was unwittingly moving toward a new abyss. And that is what we will look at in the conclusion, the Peace of 1814 as history with an asterisk. An agreement that seemed solid, until it began to crack. So, yes, the Peace of 1814 did exist, but with an asterisk the size of the Eiffel Tower. Was it real? It was. But it was also selective, unequal, hastily put together by leaders who trembled at the mere thought of the French guillotine or Napoleon's troops marching across the Alps. A peace made not so much out of conviction as out of exhaustion and fear. In this period, Europe became a kind of historical Westworld. From the outside, everything seemed sophisticated, organized, functional. But if you looked closely, if you moved a piece out of place, you saw that it was all programmed to hide a deep pain. The empires remained solid, but like glass giants. The colonies, invisible on the map of peace, were the scene of daily violence. And the peoples within Europe, silent, squeezed between promises of stability and the constant fear that any liberal whisper would spark a new fire. And here's the most uncomfortable question of all. Are we living in a new 1814? We look around and see peace agreements, treaties, summits, seals of stability. But we also see veiled censorship, recycled fears, conflicts geographically displaced, technology used to monitor rather than liberate. Does the peace we know today also come with an asterisk? Are we building stability, or just pushing through cracks? Because what began in Vienna in 1814 seemed like a permanent solution. And it lasted a century, until 1914, when an attack in Sarajevo became the first domino, and the whole house of cards collapsed. But that is a topic for other episode. Because in the next episode, we'll stay right here in Vienna, but flip the script. We'll uncover how the very same decisions that created peace also planted the seeds for future chaos. From frustrated national movements to suppressed revolutions and bitter rivalries, the Congress didn't just shape the 19th century, it cursed it. So if you like diving into this kind of history, where what's in the books is just the tip of the iceberg, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell and stay tuned. Because peace, my friend, is never as peaceful as it seems.